The Mechanic and the Car Owner, a secret passion, lesbian passion. It started with the sound of an engine that wouldn't turn over, a simple breakdown on the edge of town. She walked into my garage carrying a frustration I'd seen 1,000 times before, but behind her sharp words and restless glances there was something different, something that caught me off guard. I was just the mechanic, covered in grease and hidden behind tools, while she was the kind of woman who didn't seem to belong in a place that smelled of oil and metal. At first, it was about the car. But as days stretched into return visits and long conversations in the dim glow of the shop, it became clear that the problem wasn't just under the hood. There was a pull between us, unspoken and undeniable, a secret we both felt but couldn't admit. Every time our hands brushed over the same wrench, every time her eyes lingered a little too long, the line between duty and desire blurred until it was almost gone. This story is about more than a car that wouldn't start. It's about two women from different worlds who discover something they never expected to find. It's about the danger of secrets, the fire of attraction, and the courage it takes to let yourself want what you've been taught to hide. Stay until the end, because each chapter will take you deeper into the tension, the stolen moments, and the choices that change everything. And if you believe in stories of hidden desire and the power of love that defies expectations, subscribe now, like this video, and turn on notifications, because what happens between the mechanic and the car owner will leave you breathless. The day she first walked into my garage, I was elbow-deep in grease, trying to coax life back into a stubborn engine that had refused to cooperate all morning. The place smelled of motor oil and hot steel, the soundtrack a steady rhythm of tools clinking against metal. It was a space where I usually felt at ease, order in the chaos, problems I could solve with my own two hands. Then she walked in, and everything shifted. Her heels clicked sharply against the concrete floor, so out of place in the workshop that I looked up before she even spoke. She stood framed in the doorway, sunlight streaming around her like she had carried the outside world into my sanctuary. She was dressed in a tailored blazer and fitted jeans, clearly not used to being anywhere near oil-stained rags and stacks of tires. But her eyes, dark, focused, impatient, met mine with a force that made my stomach flip. "Are you the mechanic?" she asked, her tone clipped, though not unkind. "Last time I checked," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "What's the trouble?" "It's my car," she replied, gesturing toward the parking lot. "It just stopped on me this morning. I had to get it towed here." I grabbed my clipboard, more out of habit than necessity. "Name?" She hesitated, as if giving it away was more intimate than it should be. "Isabella. Isabella Crane." The name rolled through my mind as I followed her outside. Her car was a sleek black sedan, the kind that didn't usually end up in small-town garages like mine. I popped the hood and leaned over, checking connections, wires, fluid levels. She stood just behind me, her perfume faint but noticeable, a sharp contrast to the gasoline and metal scent that clung to my skin. "You'll need to leave it with me for a day or two," I finally said, straightening. "Electrical issue. Nothing too scary, but it takes time." Her sigh carried relief and irritation at once. "Of course, just my luck. I can't afford to be without a car this week." I shrugged. "We'll get you back on the road as quick as I can. In the meantime, if you need rides, there's a rental place down the street." She studied me for a second, like she was trying to figure out if I was teasing her or just being practical. Then, surprisingly, she smiled, a small, real curve of her lips that made me look away too quickly. When she left, the garage felt quieter, emptier. I tried to focus on the car, but my mind kept wandering to her voice, her eyes, the way she didn't quite fit in here but somehow made the space feel brighter. The next afternoon, she came back. I wasn't expecting her, and I almost dropped the wrench in my hand when she walked in wearing casual clothes this time. Jeans, sneakers, hair tied back loosely. She looked younger, less untouchable. "Thought I'd check on the progress," she said, leaning lightly against the wall. I wiped sweat from my forehead. "You don't trust me?" "It's not that," she said quickly. "I just like to see things for myself." I smirked. "Fair enough. Want me to show you what's going on?" Her eyes lit with curiosity. "Actually, yes." So I walked her through the problem, pointing out the faulty wiring, explaining why the engine kept stalling. She leaned in closer than necessary, her shoulder brushing mine as she peered into the car. I tried to focus on the explanation, but all I could feel was the heat radiating from her skin, the faint sound of her breath as she listened. "You really know your stuff?" she said softly when I finished. "It's my job," I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. But her gaze lingered on me, longer than it should have. Something unspoken passed between us, and I had to step back, grabbing another tool just to break the moment. Over the next few days, Isabella came by often. Sometimes she asked about the car. Other times she just lingered, sipping coffee she brought with her, sitting on the edge of the workbench while I tinkered under the hood. She asked questions about my work, my life, as if she genuinely wanted to know more. I answered cautiously at first, but little by little, I let pieces of myself slip out, stories about long nights fixing trucks, about how the garage had belonged to my father before me. And in return, she revealed fragments of her own life. She ran a small marketing firm in the city, she said, but had moved out here temporarily to escape the grind. She admitted she didn't know much about cars, though she liked the independence of having one. There was loneliness in her tone sometimes, the kind that comes from holding too much inside. It was during one of those afternoons that the first crack appeared in the professional wall I had built. I was leaning under the hood, hands busy with wires, when she reached over to hand me a tool. Our fingers brushed, just a touch, fleeting and simple, but it sent a shock through me I hadn't felt in years. I glanced up, and she was watching me with eyes that gave nothing away and everything at once. "Thanks," I said quickly, taking the tool. "Anytime," she replied, her voice low. The silence stretched between us, thick with things neither of us dared to name. That night, after she left, I lay awake in the small apartment above the garage, staring at the ceiling. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just being kind, curious, maybe lonely. But deep down, I knew better. Something was building between us, and it was only a matter of time before the engine of whatever this was refused to stay idle. By the end of the week, the car was fixed. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt unsettled. Because when Isabella came to pick it up, I realized the problem wasn't the engine anymore. The problem was me, caught between duty and desire, between the safety of silence and the risk of wanting something I wasn't supposed to. As she slid into the driver's seat, her hand brushed mine again, lingering just a second longer than it needed to. Her eyes met mine, dark and searching. "See you soon?" she asked. The words were casual, but the tone wasn't. And in that moment, I knew nothing about this was going to stay simple. When Isabella drove away that afternoon, the sound of her car fading down the street left the garage feeling hollow. I tried to convince myself it was over. She had her car back, and with it, my excuse to see her. But deep down, I knew I didn't believe that. The very next day, she returned. Not in the sedan I had fixed, but walking, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee as if she had been carrying it for me the whole way. "You forgot this," she said with a grin, setting the cup on the workbench. I raised an eyebrow. "I don't remember ordering coffee." "Well, I remembered you," she replied, her voice light but her eyes locked on mine. "And you look like someone who doesn't stop working long enough to get one." I tried to laugh it off, but the warmth of her thoughtfulness sank deep into me. She perched on the stool across from me as if she belonged there, and I realized I didn't mind the intrusion. We talked as I worked, her words filling the garage with a different kind of energy. She told me about her company, about how she'd built it from scratch and the stress that came with leading a team. She confessed she sometimes wondered if she had sacrificed too much for success. I listened, nodding, admiring her honesty. "You sound like you carry the weight of the world," I said. She shrugged, her smile faltering just slightly. "It's heavy sometimes. But maybe I like being here because, for once, I don't have to." That admission lingered between us. I busied myself with tightening bolts, pretending my hands weren't shaking. Over the next week, Isabella came by almost every day. Sometimes she brought coffee, sometimes food, sometimes nothing at all except herself. She'd sit on the workbench, legs swinging like a teenager, her laughter echoing through the shop whenever I made a dry joke. The garage, once filled only with clanging tools and the hum of engines, began to feel alive in a new way. But with her presence came confusion. Every time her eyes lingered, every time her hand brushed mine as she passed me a rag, every time she leaned just a little too close while watching me work, the air thickened with something unspoken. I told myself not to read too much into it, but my heart had already decided otherwise. One Thursday evening after I had closed up, I found her waiting by the door. She leaned against her car, arms crossed, a teasing smile playing on her lips. "You didn't think you'd escape without seeing me today, did you?" she said. I chuckled. I thought maybe the novelty had worn off. Not even close. We ended up walking to the diner down the street. The place smelled of fried food and old vinyl seats, the kind of small-town spot that never changes. Over burgers and fries, we talked about everything, from childhood stories to favorite movies. I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone in years, things about my father and the garage, about the nights I'd stayed awake wondering if this life was all I was meant for. She listened intently, her chin propped on her hand, her eyes never leaving mine. "You're more than this garage," she said softly. "You know that, right?" The word struck me, both comforting and terrifying. Because for the first time, someone was seeing me outside of my role, outside of the grease and tools. And it was her. After dinner, we lingered outside under the neon diner sign. The air was cool, and the street was quiet. She stood close, too close, her perfume brushing against me like a secret. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice lower now. "I needed it." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. So did I. Our eyes locked, and for a split second, it felt like she might close the distance. My breath caught, waiting, but then a car drove past, breaking the spell. She stepped back, smiling, though her cheeks flushed with something more than the cold. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. The days turned into a rhythm, mornings at the garage, evenings where Isabella found excuses to stop by. She claimed it was to check on her car, to make sure everything was running smoothly, but we both knew better. The tension built like pressure in an engine. And then, one late evening, it finally cracked. I was under the hood of a truck, sweat dripping down my temple, when she appeared again. This time, she didn't sit across the room. She walked straight to me, standing so close that her shoulder brushed mine as she leaned over the engine. "What are you fixing?" she asked, though her voice was softer than usual. "Fuel line," I managed, my throat suddenly dry. She nodded, her hair falling forward, close enough for me to smell the faint sweetness of her shampoo. Then she reached for a tool on the workbench, her hand brushing mine deliberately this time, not accidental, not fleeting. Her eyes flicked up to mine, holding them. The garage was silent except for the ticking of the cooling engine. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Isabella," I began, but my voice trailed off. "Yes?" she asked, her lips curving slightly, her tone daring me to finish. I took a step back, forcing distance. My hands were shaking, and I clenched them into fists to hide it. Whatever this is, it's dangerous." Her smile faltered, but her eyes softened. "So, is living a life where you never take risks?" Her words left me breathless. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just teasing. She was telling me what she felt in her own way. That night, after she left, I sat alone in the garage long after the lights had gone off. My chest was tight, my mind racing. The rules I'd lived by, keep things simple, stay detached, protect yourself, suddenly felt flimsy. Because Isabella Crane wasn't just another customer. She was the spark I hadn't known I was missing. And the question that now haunted me was simple. How much longer could I keep resisting before the engine of this secret passion roared to life? By Friday, Isabella had settled into my days the way music sneaks into a quiet room. Soft at first, then filling every corner. She arrived near closing, rain stitched across her jacket, hair damp around her face. The garage smelled like warm metal and brake cleaner. The radio hummed a blues guitar that made everything feel slower. "You're still open?" she asked, easing the roll-up door shut behind her. "For you," I said, tossing a rag onto the bench. "But your timing is criminal. Those shoes won't survive this floor." She glanced at her soaked sneakers and grinned. I brought them here to suffer. Then she lifted a paper bag. Peace offering. Roasted chicken, rosemary, and fresh bread turned the workbench into a small miracle. We ate side by side, elbows bumping, the storm drumming steady on the roof. When we were done, she nodded toward the faded photo of my dad taped to a cabinet, him grinning with a wrench like it was a microphone. Tell me about him, she said. He taught me to listen before touching anything, I answered. Engines, people, all of it. After he died, I almost sold the place. But this is the only room where my thoughts line up. She turned to face me, hip against the bench, eyes steady. You don't just fix things, she said softly. You return them to themselves. Heat rose in my throat. I tried to deflect, pointing at the truck I'd just finished. That one will stop like it means it now. You do that, she said. Pull away when we get close to something real. That's so. Why? I could have said it was complicated, that it was a bad idea, that she was a customer. Instead, the truth slipped out. Because when I want something, I don't do halfway. And I don't have a map for this. Her gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned like a decision. Then don't bring a map, she said in a low tone. Bring yourself. My grip tightened around the rag. I knew exactly how it would feel to close the space. Her jacket beneath my hands, the line of her jaw, the certainty I'd been resisting. I also knew I wasn't built for almost. If I stepped forward, I wouldn't be able to pretend it was casual. A loose socket clacked to the concrete behind us and the moment splintered. Isabella didn't retreat. Instead, she took my hands, turning them palm up. Grease lived in the lines, the day written into my skin. She traced the creases with her thumb like she was learning a language. These hands, she said, barely above a breath. I've thought about them. Isabella, I managed. Look at me. I did. Whatever defenses I had left eased open. Do you want me to stop? She asked. It was a doorway and a dare. No, I said, honest to the bone. She lifted my right hand and kissed the first knuckle. The smallest touch, and I felt it everywhere. Another kiss landed on the inside of my wrist where the pulse can't lie. The world contracted to the warmth of her mouth and the rain on the roof. Her phone buzzed against the workbench, screen lighting our faces. Evan, dinner? Waiting. The room cooled a few degrees. She silenced the call, jaw tight, and set the phone face down. The silence between us changed shape. Is that, I began, then stopped. Jealousy never looked good on me. It's complicated, she said, meeting my eyes. He's been around a long time. I nodded because nodding was easier than letting my voice betray me. You don't owe me explanations. That's exactly what I don't want, she said quickly. Half-truths. Then tell me what this is, I said, surprising both of us. Because I won't be a detour on your way to someone else. She took a step closer, then reined herself in. Conflict crossed her face cleanly, like lightning behind glass. I don't know what I'm planning, she admitted. I just know that when I leave here, the world gets loud again. And when I'm here, it's quiet enough to hear myself. To hear you. Thunder rolled long and low. The fluorescent lights flickered, then steadied. She slid the phone into her pocket like hiding it might mute the problem. I shouldn't have come, she said, then shook her head. That sounds wrong. I'm glad I came. I didn't expect to feel this much. Me either, I said. We stood too close and still didn't touch. My hands felt strangely empty without tools to hold. She exhaled, then said, almost to herself, Evan is a habit, the kind that looks like a plan if you don't examine it. And me? The question left before I could cage it. Her answer was so soft the rain tried to steal it. You feel like a choice. Footsteps creaked near the front door. We both turned. A shape leaned against the fogged glass, breath blooming pale on the pane, then a knuckle rapped twice on the metal, polite, patient, entitled. Isabella. A man's voice, careful and familiar. You in there? She closed her eyes for the length of a heartbeat. When she opened them, they were bright with a decision I couldn't read. I need to handle this, she said in a steady, low tone. Please, don't go. Another knock, Harder this time. The storm hissed. My chest stilled the way it does when everything might tilt. I reached for the latch, instincts stacking in neat rows. Assess, control, contain. Her fingers closed around my wrist, warm and shaking. Wait. Through the glass, the silhouette shifted, hand cupped to see inside. Isabella? It's me. I looked at her. She looked at the door. Somewhere under our feet, the building hummed like a warning. What do you want me to do? I asked. She swallowed, then lifted her chin. Stand beside me. I stepped into place at her shoulder, feeling the tremor leave her grip as it settled into resolve. My other hand hovered near the deadbolt. The rain eased, then returned in a harder sheet, the sound like applause for a scene nobody had rehearsed. I turned the lock. The door swung up 2 inches and caught on the chain. Isabella? The voice said again, closer now, as a pair of eyes found the narrow slice of light and tried to claim it. Her breath steadied. Mine did too. Evan, she said, clear and calm. Why are you here? His answer landed through the gap, warm with ownership. Because you stopped answering and I don't like being kept outside. The chain vibrated between us. I felt Isabella's hand squeeze my wrist once, gratitude, or warning, or both. Then maybe, she said, voice even, you should stop arriving uninvited. The rain surged. The chain held. And in the breath before his reply, I realized 3 lives were about to change in a room that smelled like oil, bread, and something we had finally stopped pretending wasn't real. The chain rattled under Evan's hand, his eyes trying to pierce through the narrow slice of light at the door. The storm pressed harder against the garage roof, thunder rolling like a truck down a long hill. Isabella stood next to me, shoulders squared, but I felt the tremor in her grip on my wrist. You stopped answering me, Evan said, voice low but cutting. So I came to see you. Face to face. It's late, Isabella replied, steady but quiet. Late's when people are honest, he said, leaning closer, fogging the glass. Don't make me stand in the rain like a stranger. You are a stranger, I said, stepping slightly forward. And you're staying on that side of the door. His eyes cut toward me, assessing, dismissive. This is between Isabella and me. She asked me to stand beside her, I told him. That makes it mine too. For a second, something like surprise flickered across his face. Then his smile came, thin and cruel. Of course she did. Isabella lifted her chin. Evan, this isn't a good time. Then make it a good time, he snapped. What? 3 years just vanish because you want space? Because you found someone new to pass the hours with? That's not what this is, she said firmly. I ended it long before tonight. You just didn't want to hear it. The words hung heavy in the damp air. Evan shifted, rain dripping off his jacket, his patience gone. So that's how you want to do it. You'll regret it, Isabella. You know what I can do. He slid his phone up against the gap in the door. The glow lit his face, smug and calm. On the screen, an unsent email sat open, addressed to a long list of contacts, her clients, investors, community partners. The text was poison-dressed as concern, recent instability, erratic leadership, personal distractions compromising her judgment. I hit send, he said lightly, and your career slows to a crawl by sunrise. My pulse slammed. Isabella stiffened but didn't step back. That's blackmail. That's truth management, Evan countered. I'm giving you a chance to stop before it gets ugly. You need to leave, I told him, heat coiling in my voice. Now. He tilted his head, still smiling. And what exactly are you going to do if I don't? I'll document this threat, call the police, and make sure your name's the one burned into every report, I said. Isabella's voice cut through, sharp as glass. Evan. Put the phone away. Don't call me, don't show up again. You're done. His eyes flicked between us. Then, with a quiet laugh, he pocketed the phone and stepped back. This isn't over, he said softly. You'll see. The shadow of his figure dissolved into the rain, footsteps retreating across the lot. I slammed the deadbolt and leaned against the door for a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Isabella exhaled, long and shaky. She turned toward me, her face caught between fury and relief. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't think I could have stood there alone. You didn't have to, I told her. Not anymore. She reached up then, her hand brushing my shoulder, lingering longer than necessary. Her eyes searched mine, and in them I saw something beyond fear, a longing that mirrored the ache I'd been holding back for days. You stood beside me, she whispered. You asked me to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It brimmed with everything unsaid. My hand lifted on instinct, fingers grazing her arm, testing the line we'd both pretended wasn't there. She didn't pull away. Then her lips parted slightly, and for a moment I thought she'd close the space. My pulse roared. A sharp crash shattered the air. We spun toward the back of the garage. A window above the tire rack had splintered inward, shards of glass scattered across the floor. The storm hissed through the opening, carrying the metallic tang of wet asphalt. I grabbed Isabella, pulling her behind me. My voice was steady, though my chest raced. Stay here. Call the police. Her fingers clung to my sleeve. What if it's him? Then he's about to regret coming back, I said, already moving. The overhead lights flickered as the motion sensor near the alley blinked red. A shadow slipped past, quick and deliberate. The storm masked the sound, but my instincts knew someone was inside. Police are on the way. Isabella shouted toward the dark. Leave now. The only answer was silence, and then the scrape of a shoe across concrete. I tightened my grip on the wrench in my hand, every nerve on edge. Whoever it was had chosen this storm, this moment, thinking it would cover their tracks. But storms also strip everything bare. I took another step toward the darkness, the broken window dripping behind me, the weight of her trust pressing into my back like a second heartbeat. And then, from the shadows, a voice I recognized cut through the storm. Face to face, Evan said, calm and terrifying. Like I promised. The lights flickered again. Isabella gasped behind me. And I knew the night wasn't done testing how far I was willing to go to protect her, or how much I was willing to risk for the choice we both already knew we'd made. The moment Evan's voice filled the garage, everything inside me sharpened. I positioned myself between him and Isabella, my pulse steady despite the storm roaring outside. His hood dripped rain, his shoes leaving dark prints on the floor. He looked less like a man in control now and more like someone desperate not to lose it. You need to leave, I said, my voice flat, carrying. He tilted his head, smiling faintly. You think you can guard her forever? What happens when you're not here, grease-stained and ready to play hero? Isabella stepped forward, her hand brushing my back for courage. Her voice was steady, though her chest rose and fell too quickly. Evan, listen to me. This ends tonight. Whatever you think you still have, it's over. You can't threaten me, and you can't scare me into silence. Her words landed harder than mine ever could. His smile faltered, his jaw tightening. You don't mean that, he muttered. You've always needed me. No, she said, firmer now. What I needed was to believe I was alone. But I'm not anymore. I felt the weight of those words hit us both. For a second, Evan's eyes flicked to me, and in them I saw recognition, the realization that she meant it. The sirens broke the tension before anything else could. Faint at first, then rising, cutting through the storm like knives. Evan stiffened, calculating. Your choice, he said finally, backing toward the broken window. But you'll regret it when people see who you really are. I'm not hiding anymore, Isabella replied. His eyes lingered on her, hard, then he slipped into the storm, swallowed by the rain before the red and blue lights painted the lot. When the officers arrived, they found only glass, footprints, and shaken voices. Reports were taken, reassurances offered. By the time the last cruiser pulled away, the garage was quiet again, though the storm still muttered against the roof. I locked the door, double-checked the bolts, then turned. Isabella stood in the middle of the floor, arms wrapped around herself, hair damp, eyes shining with more than fear. She looked at me like she wanted to speak but didn't know where to begin. I crossed the space slowly, giving her room. It's over for tonight, I said softly. She nodded, a tear slipping free. I've been carrying his shadow for so long. I thought it would never leave me. I reached out, brushing the tear with my thumb before I realized I had moved. "Shadows don't win against light," I said. Her lips trembled, then curved into the smallest smile. "You always know how to say exactly what I need." "It's not a line," I said. "It's the truth." Something inside her broke open then, not in weakness, but in release. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, pressing her face into my shoulder. I held her, breathing her in, the weight of her body against mine grounding me in a way nothing else ever had. For a long time, we just stood there, the storm outside becoming a distant hum. Finally, she leaned back enough to meet my eyes. Her hands framed my face, fingers trembling but sure. "I'm tired of being afraid of what I want," she whispered. "Then don't be," I said and kissed her. It wasn't hurried, wasn't frantic. It was slow and certain, a promise made with lips and breath and every unspoken word between us. Her mouth was warm, insistent, and when she deepened the kiss, I let every wall I had built collapse. When we finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing like we'd run miles. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice raw but lighter. "We face whatever comes," I said. "Together." She smiled then, a real one, luminous even in the dim garage. "Together." We cleaned up in silence, but it was a new kind of silence. Full, not empty. When we finally climbed the stairs to the small apartment above the shop, the storm had begun to ease, leaving only the occasional rumble. We sat by the window, a single lamp glowing, 2 cups of tea warming our hands. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Isabella admitted, her gaze fixed on the dripping eaves outside. "But for the first time in years, I'm not terrified of it." I watched her, the strength in her shoulders, the softness in her eyes. "That's because tomorrow isn't yours alone anymore." Her hand slipped into mine, fingers interlacing with quiet certainty. "You're right," she said. "And I don't ever want it to be again." We sat like that until the storm passed, the sky clearing just enough to reveal a sliver of moon. The glass shards still littered the garage below, Evan's threats still lingered on the edges of reality, but inside that small room, something stronger had taken root. It wasn't just survival. It wasn't just defiance. It was love, unexpected, undeniable, and ours. Looking back now, I realize the night didn't just end something. It began something worth every risk, every fear. Because love doesn't arrive when life is perfect. It arrives when you're brave enough to open the door, even with the storm pounding outside. So I ask you, what storms are you still letting hold you back? What doors have you kept closed out of fear? Love doesn't wait for safety. It waits for courage. And if this story moved you, subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications, because sometimes the most powerful journeys begin where fear ends.